constructive part of that discussion.
Thank you for a great.
So both of these work.
Both of those work, but Tamara at the back has them muted so that they don't, everybody isn't listening to us right now. Okay. So as soon as we get the grant, get the next presentation.
We have two, we got delayed a little bit, understandably. We had heated and charged debates, which I'm really hoping that it will carry on for the rest of the day and beyond. We have two really exciting presentations, and I will introduce the presenters one by one as they come up to the stage. The first presenter is Nick Hassendonk. He is a landscape architect, and he teaches at the Amsterdam Academy of Architecture, and for a long time, decades, is associated with the public service. I think I was advised to say public service, and he also very with great humility told me that he's a functionary of a government. I thought that in the age of dysfunctional governments, and that's quite a compliment, that you can actually function. And indeed he did, in the sense that I'm really looking forward to this presentation, because he not only lives, manages, but also participated in the designing of a community, Langsemeer, in the Netherlands, which served as an example of the theory and speculation that he worked on in books such as A Vision on City Landscapes, which was published in 1995, and he was one of the authors of this very interesting visionary policy document that introduced concepts such as urban agriculture, city metabolism, and green infrastructure in the urban-rural policy arena. And that's, I think the urban stroke rural is quite a key framing here. And he worked for many years in association with the Dutch government, and today his talk is entitled The Landscape of Food and Agriculture and the Role of Landscape Architect. Nick.
Okay. I was a bit surprised to be the first one. I thought I had to lecture second, but here I am. I came flying over from the lowlands, so I'm rather tired. It was quite a trip, and afterwards I started working in the wrong rhythm, so I'm tired. And coming over, I thought, will it be worthwhile to come over, all this trip, and having such a big ecological footprint, losing all the credits I gained in my neighborhood. So. But I can say thank you to the committee for inviting me, and thank you to the sponsors of this symposium, because I can say already, apart from what is going to come, that it's worthwhile coming over. Both the content, both all the speakers, and also the situation that you're in. It's good to experience it real life instead of on the telly in the Netherlands and criticizing and debating and discussing about it. So, and I was also worrying about what I'm going to tell about, what I'm going to talk about, what would be interesting for you with such a amount of interesting scholars. We heard very, very important and interesting stories, so I thought, what can I contribute? What I'm going to contribute is, I think, just some stories, some images about the neighborhood where I live in, and where I reside together with 1,000 other residents, my neighbors. So you're going to be a bit a part of my life. I understood that some of you already have visited us. Even some are being guided by my front neighbor. Others have been have excursions by other people in my neighborhood, because we are a very open neighborhood. Eva Langsmeer, the EVA stands for a foundation that was directed to education, advice, and the V, I don't know how to translate, but it's about bringing ideas into the world and make them prosper. So that was this target of the foundation. So as expressed, I'm a landscape architect by education. I'm the IFLA delegate for the Netherlands. Now and then I'm a professor. I teach at the Academy of Architecture in Amsterdam. But overall, this story is about my part in being active resident of Langsmeer, Culemborg, a city near Utrecht in the Netherlands. The funny thing is that together with my colleagues in the 90s, I wrote this study, Visie Stadslandschappen, bad translated as a vision on city landscapes. And we put in many, many innovative concepts that were totally not understood in this period, especially because we were civil servants and we had to communicate with farmers, we had to communicate with everybody in the urban-rural situation. So we were too innovative. We brought in things about urban agriculture, about metabolism in the city, etc. Some things marched ahead, and others still are innovative. So, but wonder, in another field, on another scale, people were working in Culemborg, and they brought into practice what we had invented only in our minds. So it was fun to go there. Then a bit about the broader context. We have seen it before, the globe, and I always find it interesting to address the fact that this image could only come into being in the 60s when I was young, because of American and Russian astronauts going into space. For me, it's very normal, this image, but nobody had seen this before. So in the 60s, when we had this kind of technology to change the world, to interfere in ecosystem Earth, it was the same moment that we were able to see the globe as a whole and to invent these ideas about that. So that's special. Now in the moment that you have the power to participate, to distract, to develop, you have also the power to see it. And another image of those days, maybe some know it, it's photographies of Nielsen, a Swedish man who in this time had the possibility to enter in a woman's womb and to take pictures of young humans. So my parents used this to give me some reproductive lessons or sexual lessons. I remember the little booklet. It was full of beautiful pictures, also a kind of globe where this human is starting to live. And I think it's interesting when we are thinking about our ideals and about what we could be working on. It's this dialogue between global Earth, this big organism, and on the other side, this small organism, human, one of the organisms on Earth, and how we can deal with this big jump of scale and how we can relate as humans and as a species to the organism Earth. When I am a resident and I'm working in our neighborhood, and on the same time I'm working on national level and even on international level, for me it feels very good to be active on all these levels and to talk on European Union level, to have concepts there, to write laws, and at the same time being very practical and work with my neighbors in the neighborhood. So this is the situation where Culemborg is situated in the center of the Netherlands. To the left, the Northern Sea, and then the continent behind. It's very central, so all the flows of water, all the flows of traffic, all the green infrastructure, everything crosses on this spot. Our neighborhood is a kind of living experiment. We try to use our neighborhood and the developing and the living in the neighborhood as a kind of experiment and example. Example is maybe a bit too non-humble, but it's overall an experiment. Can we do it? It was invented by someone with a dream. I talk later about her. She had a dream and she thought, let's make real this dream, and let's see if it really can work and how it works. So it's a kind of permanent living lab. And my part of the job was that as a resident and landscape architect, I participated with my neighbors in the foundation Terra Bella, which is the group that does or arranges the maintenance of the neighborhood, the green maintenance, the green part. And at my left, you see our gardener, because we are a board, but we also have our own gardener, which we are guiding through the neighborhood. And more than a gardener, he is a social engineer, because most of the work is engineering our neighbors so that they can develop the neighborhood as they want. So this is how it looks like on a sunny day. And in our neighborhood, it's very typical that we have fuzzy borders, because we have also complicated property structure, or a different property structure than normally in a neighborhood. So we have private property, we have shared property, common grounds, and we have public property, and you have property of firms. So the very typical is that we have this mancomunity, this shared property, which is one of the things brought in by the inventors and by the designers into the design, so that by this shared property you are more or less obliged or invited to work in the neighborhood and to share with others, because you share property. And on this image you see that there aren't very clear borders. The background is private, and this in front is public, and in front that's managed by this foundation Terra Bella. So we have a very gradual scale of properties and of types of urban green. So this is a private, this is collective garden of the house at the right. So this is designed and maintained by the people that share this property. So here you can see the situation in Culemborg. Up there is the Rhine, the big river, and in the same time it's the big green infrastructure, the ecological main structure. It's also a big problem for us, because it's the river that could inundate all the region, because we are in a polder. We are 4 meters below the level of the dike. And then at the left you have a big cultural historic infrastructure. Then you have the railroad, and the area of the neighborhood is directly situated near the railway station. That's very typical that this space was left over or open for urbanization still, so near the railway station, but that's due to the cause that a water producing firm, a water tower, is in the center of this parcel. So we could use this spot to develop our own neighborhood, because this example is an example of self-organization, which is in the Netherlands, where everything is done by government, and since neoliberalism by the market, it's very atypical. So this is how it looked before, just a normal agricultural site with low biodiversity, etc. But in the middle you see a poplar plant and an orchard, a pear and apple orchard, and then the water tower, and the rest is protected zone, was protected zone. So this is Marleen, one of my neighbors, and she is the woman that, going to the Rio conference and working in different building initiatives in the Netherlands, she got this dream, she got inspired by Rio in '92 to try to build a sustainable neighborhood and to show that it's possible on the level of a city, on the level of a neighborhood, to try to be as sustainable as possible, and also to show that it's not just possible, but that it's a good way of living, that you can have fun and a high livability living in such a neighborhood. So with this dream, she traveled to the Netherlands, searched companions, formed a specialist group, decided on concepts, on guidelines, and they finally found in Culemborg a city council that was prepared to receive this idea. So thanks Marleen, because afterwards it gave me the possibility to live in a nice neighborhood. So this idea was a kind of people, planet, profit avant, or just directly avant la lettre, an integration of social, ecological, and economical aspects. And I think typical for us is, when you compare it to other initiatives, that really social innovation and the social aspect, and not only the technical, as I call it, sustainable part, is try to be realized, because it's all experiment and it's an ongoing process. So we try to bring architecture in relation with landscape, to integrate different functions as living, working, recreation, to have sustainable water and energy supply, reduce the use of a car, use all kinds of ecological, sound and health sound building materials, and very important, the involvement of inhabitants and future inhabitants, because the idea is that that brings better livability and also a better way of being sustainable. And then the idea of the foundation is education and advice. So not just build it for ourselves, but doing this experiment for all the world, or for people that are interested in this experiment. In '69, a co-production between Culemborg, the city, and the foundation started, with a joint commissionership, a project group, very good. The municipality was risk-bearing in this, so they gave us the opportunity to develop it more or less on our own, but most of the ground was property of the municipality, and so they were a kind of risk-bearing, but we could develop our own ideas, which one of the success factors is that this is very typical in the moment '69, because that was the moment when we left social democratic development and planning and went over to a kind of neoliberalistic way of doing it. So it was just in the moment, a little time gap, where you could do other things than the market of developers would do. So later, after this foundation, there came a group of a resident society, which still is active, which were really the people that were going to develop, live, and maintain the neighborhood. Many of the spatial things you see in the neighborhood are referring to older ideas, for instance, the garden city idea, the garden city utopia. And special, I think, is that many times when you see followers of the garden city or of garden city urbanizations, they only look at the form. But for us was very important these ideas that were behind it, more Kropotkin ideas, anarchist ideas, and typical ideas about developing. So the whole way about thinking about projecting and soil property, developing with property, communal property, that was also inside the idea of the garden city, but many people don't realize it and never used it. And in our neighborhood, we try to use it. So we are not just trying to be ecological sustainable, but also social sustainable. The main point is participation and involvement. We use landscape urbanism architecture in an integral way and look at the flows of traffic, water, energy, materials, and not very central, but a result of that is much attention for green and food. So many experts worked together with us. They really did the plan, but I think not only the plan is important, but the final construction and then the maintenance. And during the maintenance and the time that we live in the neighborhood, we are developing many ideas and bringing them into practice. So from the beginning, the future inhabitants were involved by participation in the planning and designing, by developing their own types of housing. We have lots of diversity in housing, by designing communal gardens. So we have lots of private development projects also, by persons or by groups. There are rented houses, possessed houses, and in between with subsidy of the government. We do together the maintenance of the green zones. We have also ownership of the energy company. So before it was owned by the water company, but since some years we did a cooperation and we own our own energy company. So all this needs lots of workshops and participation. So the designing in the collective gardens is being done by help of designers. The little street where I'm living, I designed together with my neighbors, which is a typical kind of rural mixture, but we'll survive. So you do excursions to get ideas, to talk in charrettes and so on. And then afterwards it's been executed, partly by professionals, partly by the people of the neighborhood. And you have to discuss quite a lot, and the bad thing is that I have lots of feel-good pictures, but I forgot to take all the labor pictures, because important is that in this case, many times we are consumers in our society, but we are also producers of our own environment and producers of our own green and our own food. So it's the total way around, self-organization, develop it from the beginning altogether, but also becoming producers. So this, for instance, is a project where some ladies started their own school, and they built the house with their own hands and with the children and with the parents and with friends out of recycled materials. In front you see the water ponds that are used for retention and have also all kinds of other recreational ecological uses. So this is the teacher with some of her children. As I said, it's much feel-good pictures, and I think it's really good living in our neighborhood, but also it's a struggle, this experiment. It's a constant struggle and searching for new ways to organize the neighborhood, for new ways, for new solutions or problems. So this is how the plan looks like. Several small streets and elements, and then connected with a green infrastructure that follows the old forms of the river that was flowing there. So just for this social cohesion, we have these little groups of housings around the communal garden. This is the total image. To the right up you see the urban farm, because it's also part of it. And as I said, traffic is important. We keep the cars out as much as possible. We lower the use of cars. It's easy because the railway station is nearby. So as normal in the Netherlands, we have bicycle paths, pedestrian paths, etc. And the result is that when the car is out, the neighborhood is very inviting to use this area for social contacts and as playgrounds. So the streets are safe and can be used by everybody to have social contacts. Here's some people of that school with their parents. And only sometimes when it's necessary, people come in with their car to bring in some beer or heavy things. Or here too, this one is, it's an electric car, and he is filling up his car with electricity. Another thing we have to reduce car use, and the car as such, is shared cars. We have a shared car company which exists all over the Netherlands, but we have a focal point of it in our neighborhood. And another experiment we started is this with electric cars. So we are moving over to electric cars. The guidelines for the green have much of the ideas of permaculture and using the genius loci, but very important, citizen maintenance. And these local ideas about permaculture are important because it brings the children directly and the people, the adults, in contact with the green. So it's green when we have the choice. We always choose green that you can eat, that you can be in contact with, or by eating, or by touching, feeling, and also because you are the producer of the green structure. You have to maintain it yourself, and we think that's important for the involvement and the responsibility you care. The permaculture brings also this idea of green zoning, with a private zone, communal zone, and then finally the city farm and the water production zone. I think that's important because these communal gardens, they invite you to have social contacts and to work together. And the edible landscape is a very direct way of coming in contact with nature, because I think the most deep way you can be in contact with the other nature is bringing it into your own body, and mingle your organism with all these other organisms and materials. So this is the house of Marleen with the site. Here you connect the private, the communal with the public zone. Without borders, everything is rather open and interconnected. That brings lots of green feeling and lots of connection between things. These are some of the examples of the communal gardens. This is the orchard. The orchard is also fundamental because it's maintained together. It's in the center of the neighborhood and maintained. So as I said, this participation is one of the main principles. The involvement brings responsibility, and it brings extra quality, because normally the government or a private company never could be so detailed or so precise and so connected to the needs of the people, and it brings social cohesion. So here's the orchard. We have a big apple feast in around this time in September. So all the people together start collecting this. But related to the collection is also the care for the orchard. So in winter time we start podding, cutting the trees, etc. We live together with lots of biodiversity. It has been proven by monitoring that our neighborhood has more biodiversity than in general. So then the city farm has also different uses, small-scale biological farm, education, and also we can work on the farm to help the farmer. Here are Todd and Baudin. Todd is, by the way, an American who came to live over in the Netherlands. So they work on their biological farm. They have a shop for the neighborhood and for the town. And the neighbors and disabled people and people with special needs, they work on the farm. So that's, again, a way to connect to food, to connect to nature, and to have social cohesion. So after working, it's good eating together. This is Adrike, a woman interested in cooking, but she cooks for the children. First they start collecting, and then they go together and cook together with the children of the town, so that they also learn about nature in a direct way, instead of always looking at their iPhones. And so this is a combination of the orchard and the farmer, because they bring in their sheep before harvesting. All kinds of, the water systems are important, especially this connection between drinking water and the water storage and water retention. So we have reed beds to filter the grey waters and then bring it out into the countryside. Then the energy is a central thing. Also here you have this diversity and connection, because the energy comes out of the drinking water by a kind of heat exchanger. It was first owned by the water company, but then when they tried to sell it on the market, we as neighbors came together, had lots of discussions, workshops, and finally we decided to buy the company so we could organize our own heating, which is called energy firm Thermobello. So you have all kinds of private separate buildings. Here you see some of the zones. This is normal glass houses which are in the neighborhood, which give the possibility to construct your own house in the glass house, because the glass house, a normal horticultural house, provides already protection for the climate, and then you are free inside to develop your own way of living. And also we have subterranean living houses and all kinds of typical developed houses. This is a bifamiliar house. The man in front is organizing our compost. And apart from working, I have too few working pictures. We have lots of parties and all kinds of things to live together and to learn together. And as I said, not just for ourselves, but we have during the year many excursions coming from all over the world to share with us the experiences we have in this experiment. Here, for instance, people from Taiwan, many people from France, from China, all over the world are visiting us. And another way of doing this, spreading the idea, is we had two big festivals. One was See for Real, so it's connected to the idea of the neighborhood. You can see for real that it's possible to live and to develop in this way. And 2 months ago we had a big festival organized by others, but they came into our neighborhood and to show shared grounds, to show how you can share grounds and what the effect will be. And this is one of the examples of the artworks, because it was an art festival. And it's very interesting. On this spot there were many problems with vandalism and with people hanging around and so on, and I was afraid that they would destroy the artwork, but they put it there 2 months ago, and it's very fine, and 2 months there and nothing happened. You can see that if you make something where people can see that you brought attention to it, they treat it different. I mean, it's just an ordinary thing. So lessons and questions about it, because I said this is lots of feel good, but there are also many problems and discussions and dark side about it. The outcome is, and we have proven that by monitoring, is the higher sustainability score we have, the social cohesion it gives us. We have biodiversity gains, the livability is higher, and very important, at the general I want to say, listening to all the talks, it's about people. So people have really to do it themselves on a small scale, and in the same time you can contribute to the bigger discussion and to discussions on national scale or international scale. And it's typical that many of the people that live in our neighborhood also are active on a national or international scale. They are part of the government, part of foundations, they are active in other neighborhoods. So more on a theoretical level, you could think about scale and continuity, because this is an experience of 20 years. And what about continuity? We had some problems with that, and you have to think about it. And scale, this is just a scale of 1,000 people living together in a neighborhood. And can this be upscaled to higher scales? And are we just a niche which is not able to repeat, in a sense, from a niche for sustainable living, or can it also be generic? And I think the living city, it's about people, but it's also about animals and plants and materials. So we try to live together with all the other organisms in our neighborhood. And it's, above all, it's about people acting. So you really have to work on realizing your dreams, and that means that you have to interfere in the nature, you have to interfere and have contact and communicate with the other, with your neighbors and with the government, and with, so that's what I learned in the neighborhood, I think. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. That was so fascinating. And it's always harder to do than to talk about things. The next speaker I'm going to introduce Paolo Vigano. Paolo Vigano is an architect and urbanist and professor of urban theory and urban design at EPFL Lausanne, where he coordinates the Lab U and the new Habitat Research Center, and at the Università IUAV of Venice, where she coordinates the program in urbanism and PhD program in architecture. And there's a long list of recognitions and her accomplishments in the booklet, and I'm not going to repeat. And I just want to say that absolutely impressed by her expansive and provocative and probing thoughts about architecture, urban design, and the whole idea of a project as a way of research in kind of discussing the very difficult question of what is knowledge in the field of architecture and urban design. And it's not easy, and many people have spent a lot of time discussing this, and I think that her work is extraordinary in that aspect. Her talk today is entitled Horizontal Metropolis. Paula.
So I'm the last one, I think, so I suppose you are tired. I hope to not to annoy you too much. Thank you. So, in fact, I will not present the book, Territorials of Urbanism, but I would like to present you a research. Research made with a lot of students in the past 4 years. And this research, maybe I would propose it as an answer to a certain number of questions, part of which have been addressed today. In a book, in the last book that was published by Bernardo Secchi, that has not been translated yet in English, The City of the Rich and the City of the Poor, Bernardo deals with 3 hypotheses. The first, urbanism has major and well-defined responsibilities in the deepening of social inequalities. The second hypothesis, a better world is possible if we understand that the emergence of a new urban question, which can be described as, first, the result of a growing divarication between rich and poor, second, the environmental crisis, and third, the right to mobility, where mobility is not just mobility of a body in space, but social mobility. And the project of the city can be a starting point to realize it. The third hypothesis is that space is not infinitely malleable, is not infinitely available to any change requested from the economic and social side. Space shows resistance and inertia. At the same time, it contains trajectories that may guide along certain direction. So the research I will present, the Horizontal Metropolis Radical Project, works on the three hypotheses and investigates the possibility of a project addressing the new urban question in a radical way. So, the horizontal metropolis. The horizontal metropolis is the space in which normally we live. It is a space that is never on the public agenda. I have to say, not even in Quito, not even in UN Habitat. It refers to the closely interlinked, co-penetrating rural-urban realms. It's made of transportation infrastructure, economic systems. It's a layered territorial construction where agriculture and non-agriculture economic activities creates an original mix. Now, for me, this space that I call horizontal metropolis, we will see can be also called in different way, is a true agent of transformation. We can consider it a support and a place of potentialities. And also, I think we have to start to consider it a natural capital as well as a spatial capital. So the research is in fact about this space, its traditions, the authors that have reflected on it, and on its relevance today as energetic, ecological, and social design issues. The idea of the horizontal metropolis, this definition, which is in fact an oxymoron. Horizontal and metropolis not really do not fit. So traditionally, the metropolis is traditionally a very hierarchical construction, place of power, concentrated power, with a vast periphery around it. So to conceive differently the metropolitan space is, I think, something extremely crucial today. To give a different idea of what can be a metropolitan space. Taking the best of the metropolis as a place giving choices, freedom, alternatives, but also considering a horizontal space. So this idea came out working on a vision for Brussels, 2040, together with Bernardo Secchi in 2010. As you can see in this picture of Europe, the northern part of Europe, you see London, you see Paris, and you see this very vast, dispersed, but very also dense metropolitan area that has Brussels at its center. It is clearly a different object respect to Paris or London. And having worked for many, many years, having designed many projects and realized many public spaces in Flanders especially and in Belgium, we found the necessity to try to give a definition of such a space that is metropolitan, a space that is extremely well infrastructured, a space in which you can live everywhere, in which you can work with some territorial figures, the river valleys, but also the impressive railway structure, so the iron structure, and that is rich in metropolitan figures in which you can find the old centers, for example, of the cities, or the new big infrastructures like airport, or even the rivers. Of course, this is a different type of metropolis. Here you see the Randstad on one side and Paris on the other side, and in the middle, the Brussels metropolitan area with Antwerp in the north, Charleroi in the south, the mine, the coal mine, in fact, basin. And it is a space where the relation between open space and built space is different from the other cases. And we could measure, we could understand that, in fact, in such area, every citizen, statistically, has something around 4 meters length of contact with open space, while, for example, in Paris it has just 50 centimeters, and in the Randstad only 30 centimeter, which is quite strange. But this is because of this model, the way in which the pattern is constructed. And what is interesting in such a place is that the different cities create this metropolitan condition with the complementarity, with different specificity. One is one of the most important universities in Europe, another one is the second harbor in Europe, a third one is the capital of Europe, etc. So there is this complementarity that is something related to a history of centuries in which this sort of division of power organized this territory, missing a big city. So there were not really big cities, but small, medium cities. And the network infrastructure is absolutely coherent to that. So cities are not working as hubs. Cities are simply crossed by infrastructures, which means that all the territory is in fact inhabited. And in such type of metropolitan area, of course, the soil, the quality of the soil is very important, because there is still a lot of open space and a lot of urban agriculture, a lot of forest. So depending on the fertility of the different part, you have the forest on one side and the agriculture on the other side. And then you can imagine projects in which you work with the flooding risk, the image you see at the bottom. You can work with the green structure of the small forest following the river courses. And you can work with the social welfare structure that are schools, because the question of education is particularly crucial in a metropolitan area that is extremely attractive, that will grow in the future, but it will mainly grow because of immigrants. So it will mainly grow because of poor population arriving. And for this, there will be a need of a concrete investment on education, schools, clusters, etc. So we work with the idea of this urban agriculture, the new clusters of schools, education, flooding risk, and also the biodiversity and the forest along the river courses. Producing images like this one, so extremely hyper-realistic in the idea that when we think about the future, we have to think about the future in a very, very realistic way, as much as possible, because we have to concretely describe what the change might be. The way in which we worked on the research that was made after this experience is dividing in 3 main chapters about the tradition of thinking about such type of space, the space itself, and ideas about its future. So the genealogy of the thinking, the theories, the ideas about this type of space is absolutely fascinating. I have not the time to go in detail of this slide, but I hope in January to have the time, in fact, to spend hours on it. But just understand that it is more than a century that we are reflecting on this type of space. from Patrick Guedes' conurbation until the city territory in the 60s of the 20th century in Italy. And what is important is that each definition highlights a specific question, addresses, in fact, a specific question of this space. Take, for example, to remain on Brussels, the definition that was proposed mid of the 80s by Marcel Smets about the idea of a radiant periphery. So this type of space as being radiant periphery. Of course, Le Corbusier radiant city is in the background, but this means that in fact this periphery, this peripherical space is the place of emancipation, is radiant, is looking towards the future and being the place of emancipation for the people living there that found, in fact, in that situation, the possibility to emancipate. Or take, for example, the Zwischenstadt, used by Sievert. So the idea that this in-between space, in between the city, has the same dignity of the space of the city itself, etc. If you like, we can come back in the discussion. What is important is that this attempt to give names, to define, to interpret such a space has been wide, and it has been crossing continents, spaces. Western scholars working on Asian scholars reflecting on Western situations, producing ideas, mixing concepts, mixing also ideologies. For example, the agropolitan space of Friedman. What is important is that, in fact, we can work on that. This, for me, is the first fundamental point, that we have ideas on which we can continue to elaborate. And you see some of the authors, again, I don't want to. The second part of the research is about measuring, mapping, representing such a space. Because, of course, we need to see it, to observe it, to understand regularities. Marina was talking about modularities. There are a lot of modularities in such territories. Look at this city territorial, ville territoire, as André Corbeau defined it, Switzerland, the Swiss plateau between Geneva and Zurich. You see the regularity of the system. The villages put at always the same distance. Of course, the relation with agriculture is obvious. But you see the rhythms that they construct. And it was the same territory on which in 1940, Armin Meili was imagining a linear city connecting, in fact, Geneva with Zurich. And Armin Meili was the one proposing this idea of decentralized concentration that was extremely influential also in the Swiss planning context. The way in which we have observed such territories is in the idea that you can read the rationalities and the rationalizations that are there. I use both terms, rationalization, so the process, but also the rationalities, but also, you say, the actors that are transforming the territory. For example, water. This is one of the picture of the diffuse city in the Veneto area. So you see Venice just on the right, in the lagoon, and the rest is this metropolitan area, very interesting, a place of mixed use where you have industry close to the house and then the agriculture. I mean, this kind of hybrid condition is absolutely evident. That has been for a lot of time considered very chaotic, very difficult to understand what type of city is it. Is it a city? Is it a diffuse city? But when you read it through the different type of grounds and of soils, when you read the water management, that of course is related to the parts where you have very impermeable grounds, that is the lower part close to the lagoon, or the dry plain that is on the contrary very, very permeable. And then the different types of water networks are related or to irrigation or to drainage or both, sometimes. You understand this incredible labor that is in fact on those territories. When I use the term stratified, layered, it's because they are really the accumulation of thousands of years of work. And they have given this inhabitability to all the territories. Such inhabitability that opens this question of isotropy, of having the same conditions in all directions. Of course, this is a sort of mythical idea, to have a territory in which you can offer all its inhabitants the same conditions. But this type of territory is very close to it. And this is why, for example, a certain type of economy, dispersed, small-scale, industrial, manufacturing economy could develop, also profiting of such. Okay, I'm going too long, so I think it's not possible. I will not be able to conclude. I'm sorry, I'm just cutting, because just look at the titles. Look at the titles. Okay, I want to arrive to the projects. In fact, I want to show you the exercise we did, starting from Frank Lloyd Wright model of Broadacre City, 5 situations that we have explored, like, for example, this one that you know very, very well, making interviews with the people, constructing models at the same scale, same dimension of the Broadacre City model, and trying to understand the way in which those territories might change in the future. So to address the question of the transition of such territories, both in terms of new types of mobility, of course, water management, transformation, recycling the embodied energy that is already there. This is, for example, the Lausanne site that is one former industrial part of the region, but where a new type of population related to the present, to the big universities, is now arriving. But at the same time, the presence of manufacturers, of industries, is something that we should consider as fundamental. So not accepting, for example, the deindustrialization of Europe and resisting to it and imagining that this hybrid type of space could be, in fact, rethought also in terms of remaining productive. Or look at this alpine valley, again, completely dispersed, with incredible infrastructural work going on today. This one is called the correction of the Rhone River. Even the word, the vocabulary, correction, that we have to correct a river that has been corrected several times, and each time is finally getting out of this order, or the choice to go and live in such kind of environment, and the big infrastructure that are simply relics, like all the military airports remained there since World War II, when the Alps were considered very strategic for the point of view of the defense of Switzerland. I mean, we are working on such type of territories, and I'm sorry that I have not the time to show you better these images. The exhibition is still open in Venice as a collateral event of the Biennale on an island of the lagoon of Venice. So if you maybe you have not seen yet the Biennale, you might take the opportunity to go and see this exhibition that will be, in any case, published in a book. Let me just arrive to the last image. That is a Chinese case, extremely interesting, of this territory made of water and agriculture and new infrastructures. So in the type of project is a project you don't see, because it's the idea that all the territory is changing gradually, But at the end, it is a metamorphosis. So at the end, you will not recognize it as the same territory as before. And this is all the group that is related to this exhibition. I want to conclude with this quotation coming from the remarks on color of Wittgenstein, about this writer writing to Goethe, saying that very few people have ever seen pure white. So do most people use the word wrong then? And how did he learn the correct use? But he constructed an ideal use from the ordinary one. So this is the type of research we have done from the ordinary space where millions of people live. We have tried to imagine a sort of ideal use that is not to say a better one, but one that has refined along certain lines, and in the process, something has been carried to the extreme. And when you carry something to the extreme, you can also try to maybe understand a little bit better. And I think this is just food for thought, in the sense that the idea is that these kind of themes can be discussed both locally with all the communities that are, in fact, in those territories, but also globally, because they address very general, because they are ordinary territories. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's, without further ado, just invite all the speakers of this panel, Nick and Paula, to be on the stage. And I just want to introduce three more discussants. And first, Iñaki Alday is a Quesada professor of architecture in Department of Architecture, University of Virginia. And most of us know him very well, and over the past 5 years, and he's transformed the Department of Architecture into something that is amazing. It's really full of energy and passion. We certainly owe a big debt to his dedicated work. And he is now directing the Yamuna River Project, which is the first pan-university project that's focused on a specific theme. We have Mona Al-Kafif, and I'm sorry that her bio is actually not included in the booklet, so I'm going to say a little bit more. And she got a professional degree in architecture in RWTH Aachen University in Germany, and doctorate from TU Wien in Vienna. And she held several teaching positions before coming here, and she was teaching at Tulane University, and did some incredible work post-Katrina developments and research and regeneration in New Orleans. And also she was associate professor at CCA, California. And before she joined us, now she's associate professor at the School of Architecture, focusing on urban regeneration, placemaking, and urban ecologies. And finally, we have Susan Moma. Susan Moma is associate professor of urban and environmental planning at the School of Architecture, director of a community design research center, and leader of Appalachian Prosperity Project, which is a very appropriate theme here. And she has, in the past, focused, I really appreciate this frequent kind of mentioning of this wicked problem of design in architecture and urban, in the city in architecture, and which is really, we have been facing very difficult challenges, and sometimes we think that we've got it solved, and then it just escapes our attention. So she's been dedicated to the issues of social issues and the importance of design and the importance of politics. And thank you so much. So do we have a microphone somewhere? Great. So I also have this. This is open.
Shall we pass this one down?
Yes. Okay. Let's. It is working? Okay, great. I will just, like the past two panels, maybe invite the front row guests to pose some questions to our speakers and as a beginning of the discussion. Who would like to start? Nyaki? Good.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentations. The 6, I think, have been extraordinary. And I would say this is a truly exceptional day, and I think it's also highly unusual because we are used to see lots of projects in a symposium like this in a School of Architecture, and we have seen not that many in this case. And typically, after having seen lots of projects, we have been discussing less about design and more about social conditions, about politics, ecology. And interestingly, I feel I have the sensation that while we have been discussing all these things, we have had design as a kind of overarching theme, and agency of design as an overarching theme that is coming recurrently in almost or in all the presentations. So I was wondering to elaborate a little bit more about this role of the designers in this balance of systems. I was interested in this cooperative species, and I have the sensation that there are very few cooperative species, are more like convenience marriage. These cooperative species, and we tend to be, or all species tend to be predators. So how we deal with this design of the predation somehow, how we deal with this intersecting in this process that we see that is not being self-balanced economically, spatially, equality, and what's our role in this process of design, of introduction, the project. So I was posing this question to both of you, and perhaps also to introduce a little bit more the idea of that you have written extensively about the project as a knowledge producer, and if the one quick slide that was in your presentation as design as a tool of research can be also leveraged as design research as a full category.
Yeah, of course, the answer is yes. Can be a full category, yes. But it is a difficult moment for designers and for us, because in the past, in this very much criticized modern movement or modern urbanism, designers, architects and urbanists, landscape architects, they were sharing, I would say, a vision. No? It was a reformistic vision. The problem is that today that project doesn't exist anymore. And so we are not sharing a vision, we are alone. So what can we do? I think that we have to revindicate the capacity of design to produce knowledge just because otherwise we will remain simply marginal. We are completely non-existent. We are not participating. We are not discussing. We are not around the table where decisions are taken. So, because I don't think you can just advocate it as a right. There is not this right. We can just try to contribute to make clear why, for society, we might be important. And this is the way in which we work. And I think that there was one common point in our presentation that today didn't really come out so much. That is the term utopia. And of course, in the 500th anniversary of utopia, I think we have to spend a word on that. The very concrete utopia that Nick showed, and the utopia as a tool, as a research tool. In fact, that's the way in which we made those models, which means that utopia is not something completely different, is something completely out of our imagination. It is in fact something very radical. It's something which you push until what is possible. And in that pushing to what is possible, you try to understand what might be the best. This is what is lacking in our reflection, the idea of better, of best. We have not this horizon anymore. And to reconstruct this horizon, I think we need a very large debate that is not only in the School of Architecture. This, of course, is a societal debate to which we can contribute with spatial imagination, with spatial concepts, ideas, with the capacity to read the territories. And this, I think, can be a contribution.
I think interesting that you come back to the word utopia, because I referred to the Garden City utopia, but also to our own real-life utopia. Something that is typical about many utopias is that it can turn very quickly into a dystopia many times, especially when they are very theoretic and they are pushed into reality on big scale. So that's a nice thing about our neighborhood. I think we are experimenting with not too much skin in the game, as has been said before. If something goes wrong, only few people get hurt, instead of the big utopias of the big star architects and so on. Role of design. There are several ways of designing, I think. And in my country nowadays, for landscape architects and also for the rest of the profession, research by design is a thing we developed in the 90s, and we are still using it, because that's a different thing I notice when I'm walking around with IFLA than design of products. Many garden and landscape architects in the world are used to design products, a garden, a concrete thing. And in our country we developed, by being in big projects, regional scale projects that were done as products. But by this experience, finally, we developed a kind of research by design way of working, where you can have influence in politics by showing possible worlds, creating possible worlds to politicians or to groups of people. That's the way how it worked in our neighborhood. So drawing up scenarios, possible futures. And that's a totally other role of design than designing products. And that research by design thing brought us in discussion with real researchers, because then you have what's the difference between design, research, and research by design, because they don't take us serious. And in university it is difficult to have research by design compared to research. And so I think one big difference is that research, positive research, has to follow certain very strict rules, and it's in very shallow, small worlds. And on the other hand, research and images and drawing is a totally different method. You use this method by all your analytic research than doing it with laboratorium experiments in a natural science way. So when we need poetics, I think we need research by design done by real people with normal tools as pencils, as leaves, as poetics. So that it's a different world, and both worlds have their their own reality and should be combined when you are acting in the world. So that's one second step of research by design. And then the final step is, I think, designing, social designing. So which can be done by sociologists and all kinds of disciplines, but also by architects, designers, landscape architects. And in social design, then you're using your ability to draw, to make images, to make poetics, for the communication between groups, between politicians, between people, to think about possible worlds. So, enough, I think.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. During the lunch break, we had a lot of discussions, and I commented on, like, it's extremely interesting what we are learning today, but I'm starting to be extremely overwhelmed because it became very complex, and then you add the election, and you're basically a little bit lost. So I'm very glad that we are back to, let's say, the specificness of design and the built world. I feel that I'm on solid ground again. Also because there are European projects, maybe. So I think actually that the projects are related in the way how I'm looking at them. On the one hand side, they are different in scale, obviously. So on the one hand side, we are looking at metropolitan areas, the huge urban field. Maybe, you know, maybe follow Gottman's megalopolis, the largest aggregation that we know so far. Maybe tomorrow we talk about the planetary urbanism, etc. But we still think about mega regions and the metropolis. And so on the one hand side, it's still large scale, and then it's a small scale. The small scale, the one-to-one, what is happening when people come together and decide that they want to build a sustainable neighborhood. But in both cases, they are to some degree prototypes, because when I understood your very fast slideshow correctly, I hope that there will be some time while you're here to talk about this in more detail. But I remember the map with all the little red crosses that basically went along the equator. And I'm assuming these are all different, let's say, horizontal metropolis that you looked at, right? That you analyzed or that you designed in. And you had a very strong mapping approach. That helped probably to understand how we have to read these areas in order to design productively in it. So you were traveling one time around the globe and you had different conditions, different countries, different economies. The American urban field or metropolis is driven by different factors than the European one. So I'm very interested what you learned by looking at the different conditions and what this means, maybe as future guidelines. And then when it comes to the small scale, obviously, you already mentioned this in your last slide. It's a very great project that you all did together. Probably everyone was a half-time landscaper or architect while doing this for the last 20 years. It's extremely time-intensive when people commit to live in a model like this. So what did you learn from your own project that can be then fed back into maybe a less self-organized planning process? Is it, to some degree, it was very successful because everyone shared the same value. We want to design together a healthy and livable, sustainable, maybe even self-sufficient neighborhood. There are people who share other values, right? So this is a good model when people share this value. If they share the value, hey, we don't care about ecology, then a self-driven neighborhood would be a completely different situation, right? So what did you learn that can feed back into the maybe more generic planning process as a prototype, right?
What we learn, I think upscaling at least is the way how you start a project and how you communicate between each other. So I work in the Ministry of Economics, and there we have now the big issue of energy transition. And so the dialogue we practice in our community could be the same and in different scales a bit different, but you should have a dialogue instead of just saying this region has to deliver so many wind turbines or has to deliver this and this. So this idea about talking with people about shared values, but also about differences in values, because you say on the neighborhood you have one shared value, that's true, but one level below there are directly different opinions and directly different way of approaching it, and there are people, because it's a free neighborhood, you can come in, you only have to become a member, but so nobody afterwards can press you to act in a certain way. So although they are more or less shared, some values, there are much differences, and in that it looks more or less like a region that has to decide about certain things. And so in my ministry, before the way was top-down, and now we are more and more used to a dialogue. And so some of the people that I'm in contact with are using this dialogue method on a regional scale or on a national scale. First dialogue about what do we want with energy transition, then how do you want it in your region, what are the possibilities, bring together producers, consumers, developers, and have this. That's one thing at least we learned. And also we have a very open system on one hand, but on the other hand there are always people coming from outside or influences coming from outside. How do you deal with that? That's all something that happens on another scale also. So.
Follow-up question.
Okay, do you want to?
For example, if you would think about an environmental planning code, did you do an analysis? You know, you were referring to traffic, electricity, food production, water, and these are extremely interesting environmental attributes. And the question is, if the city would go ahead and say, okay, we are investing into sustainable cities, is there an environmental code, for example, that you could abstract from your test neighborhood? Residence population, amount of green space, amount in relationship to local climate, in relationship to areas for food production. I'm actually very interested in how this can become a prototype for master plans maybe in the future, so that you can secure these qualities. For example, you mentioned something very interesting. You said the property, the definition of private to public to shared to common, and that is usually normal in a normal master plan. We may be just differentiating between public and private, but you brought in a different idea of property, and that this fostered community. So I would think that this is a very interesting finding.
A code of conduct and prototype sounds so very strict. So one of the things I learned is the things that went wrong in our community were there where it's physically complete. So one thing that we wanted was a biogas plant. And when you start with a product, an already designed biogas plant combined with a hotel, combined with afterwards, it's very difficult to realize, because then everybody has to fit into this physical thing. So start with values, start with the ideas, and then bit by bit searching other people that share these values, that bring in their own ideas, and then finally maybe make a product. That's one thing. And the other thing of these shared grounds is it was brought in by first the people with the values, but then also by the designers, because you can make a spatial distribution of these grounds. So, and where you put these shared grounds, you invite for discussion, and you provoke discussion, and you provoke debate. So, yes, if you bring in different types of property, for instance, you make a totally different plan. Or if it's a neighborhood with totally shared grounds, it would be totally different. So you can experiment with that, and I would say not to make a prototype of or an environmental, how did you say, code of it. A thing that I would code is that there should be discussion and there should be dialogue, and you should begin on a value level. We are having wind energy projects in the north, which are very difficult to realize, because people come with this idea of I have properties and I want to build so many turbines on this spot for my own profit. And they never realize the product. If they would have come in with the idea, what do you think about the energy transition? I think it would be much easier, because you are not directly in the, how it's called in English, the trenches. Because when you come with a finished product, a designed finished product, and you want to push it into the space, then you come into the trenches. And if not, if you start with the values of the others, in a democratic way,
new question
yes,
so that we
yes.
can maybe compound these issues. And let's maybe Suzanne ask a new question, and then we'll
Oh, okay,
Move
great,
it on. Yeah.
great. I have two, actually, so I'll just get closer to the
Only
mic.
allowed one.
Oh, well, oh, I shouldn't have told you. I should have just, so I just have one that, no, I didn't put a question mark in there. But first of all, thank you both for your presentations and to all of you for this really remarkable day. Mine are pretty small, or my one is pretty small question. My one question. We have talked in this session and then throughout the day, really, about thresholds and scale. And I want to go there first. And I've just finished 18 months on a National Academy of Science committee to look at urban sustainability in the United States. And this notion of thresholds, how will you know when you get there, continued to be a topic of conversation. So the first part of this is whether thresholds are about increasing capacity or decreasing use and consumerism. Where do we begin? The second part of the same question is about the visualization. And, you know, I couldn't even let my question go by without mentioning the election. But I do think that part of that is, and really, Paolo, you got at this idea of new potentialities. How do we use science, of course, but also map, visualize, and frame this option or these options of new potentialities? And you also mentioned it, Nick, the scenarios, so that people see it. Convincing people that we are right is probably not a real good idea. But how we think about visualization of some of these very big ideas that we've heard about today would be, I think, is a very positive first step. So, one question, a multitude of compartments.
Well, I don't know if I understand correctly visualization. I don't know. For me, it's trying to express some ideas, and a writer has words, and we have mapping or drawings, and I think this is quite coherent. I mean, to the point is the ideas, the concepts that are in fact leading to those maps.
I guess what I'm getting at here is how we frame many of the ideas we've talked about today, including yours, so that a broader audience, a wider acceptance, a larger public will might embrace these, not just your ideas, but other ideas talked about today. I mean, I think we need a reframing as we think about the big ideas.
Personally, I've been trying to do this for few ideas, not so many, a few ideas, and you work for years on them. So, for example, the idea of isotropy or porosity, of horizontality, there are big fields, I mean, to be understood, and visualization, of course, is one part, but not just that. The type of field work you do, for example, the way in which you are on the site and you discuss and you try to understand. I think when you discuss with people, they are not so abstract. For example, talking about porous space is not something that is so academic. It becomes very, very quickly, very concrete, and it's talking about the way in which you are in the space and you dialogue with the others in the space, in which you frame your position in the space. And you can talk of social porosity, you can talk of environmental type of porosity. So I don't think this is the main point. The main point is that we have to be open to understand the bigger frame. Yeah. I think we are extremely limited in our curiosity, very often. And for example, today in the different moments, the political question came out, and someone said from the public, we should not refuse to understand that other part of the population as if they were wrong, no? For example. This, I think, is something fundamental for an approach that might produce something relevant. For example, I would say, quoting Henri Lefebvre, that utopias are what Nick showed. It's a small utopia, but the world is full of utopias. And some of them are not so nice. Some of them, Lefebvre would have said, they are petty utopias. The utopia of the single-family house with the garden. It's a petty utopia. It's not heroic. But we have to deal with them. The imaginaries are there. And if we refuse to read and to understand and to interpret and to work with them, but we are out of history. That's why my map of Europe with all the definitions is extremely interesting, not mine, but the definitions, because each one of them highlights a piece of those petty utopias. And because sometimes the academy, intellectuals, refuse to do their job, that is, to have a critical understanding, then some results might be also those that we know in recently.
Thanks a lot. I would really like to open the questions to the floor, and we'll probably follow the last session and just collect the questions first, and let's say 3 or 4, and then we can have another discussion. Any hands in the audience?
Throughout the day and probably throughout our time as students, etc., we've been confronting the notion of citizenship related to city to find some common ground, something that unites us beyond our individual identities, etc. The students yesterday spoke so in such an articulate manner about finding oneself at the scale of the individual. And on one hand, at the smaller scale, the children in that garden, you said you plant edible landscapes, and they indeed eat it. And I've been here for 24 years, and I am now part of the Virginia clay soil because I plant fruit trees, etc. So that immediacy, that humbleness, that the minerals from the ground attaches a biological kind of attachment to it all. But getting back to citizens, which some debates whether it should be residents or dwellers, there's the others, and that's the stranger. And so Seamus Heaney wrote a wonderful poem called Making Strange, when a farmer out in the country is visited by a distant cousin who's from the city, perhaps Dublin, and asks him throughout the day, tell me about your farm, tell me about the farm. And at the end of the day, the farmer, who's been on that territory for 60 years, realizes that he has seen a world anew, however familiar he was, because the question. So I'm making a case for the strangers, the city of citizens, so-called, and the strangers in this global world, and to make that testing vitality of the other and find that we still share common ground. It may only be at the marketplace, which has existed since the Agora and nothing else, where we are aware that there's a territorial source for that which we eat, and we go to people of other occupations and share that. So looking at the end of the day for where the new, novel, which I'm not so sure I agree that needs to be new. Novel could also mean what they did in the, from Homer on, I guess, is making connective tissues between vastly different things of the world. So you can make connections in this new city of vitality, perhaps, through the marketplace, which is a public forum, and perhaps literally realizing how sophisticated we are that we might be able to consume from the very place where we find ourselves in. So I'm interested in the stranger, or we should probably be more interested in the stranger and the vitality of that, as well as those who are similar in our shared values.
It's a comment. The question.
Thank you so much for those excellent presentations. And this may be a question for, I have to leave a little early, but this may be a question for not only this group, but maybe the others as well. I have missed the discussion of multimedia technologies and communicative systems as part of the generators of space and urban design and landscape design. And so I'm wondering if you might be able to comment on the influence that is dramatically different in the past 20 years to how we perceive of space and use space.
Thank you very much for such an amazing and informative lecture to everybody. And this probably a question would be more to Nick. So your project shows, many of your projects show obviously success that you got of goal of bringing social qualities of involvement, of participation of people, and how people come in contact into nature. So how do you, what was the strategy to analyze these phenomena to happen before project was built? Was there some strategy that you used to test whether your project going to make this happen?
Okay.
Again, thank you everyone. This has been extremely exciting and invigorating. So we talk a lot about mapping and kind of trying to bring in all these different elements of information as technology allows us to think about things in different ways. And these maps are very interesting and are fundamentally formal in trying to communicate through formalizing all this information. And sometimes it seems that as we increasingly just try to dilute, I guess, the architect's role in the sense that they have to consider all these disparate, separate elements and try to unify them. I wonder if there's any value in saying, well, maybe we take the opposite approach and say, and kind of simplify the architect and say it's about form, and if that could, initiate a conversation and thinking about it from a purely formal perspective.
All right. Great set of questions. Very challenging. Sure.
There's a microphone.
Okay.
So I was trained as a landscape architect, and I heard architecture is about form. Maybe that's so, but I always noticed that we are too much into the visual. There was some question about visual. We should be more in 3 and 4D and in reality. And so architecture and landscape architecture is about the body in the space and the sensations you can have with your senses, so how you are in contact with the environment. So I hope that we focus more on other senses than just the visual and the form, because you have color, you have smell, you have dark, light, cold, kinesthetic experience. All these experiences you should use, and we are not able yet to picture them, to make abstractions of them, but we should try to learn that. Although maps are still very useful and so, but maps abstract from the reality and abstract people away from their 3D living environment. So what we did, there was a question about did you have, did you test it and so on. You have to be with people, with commissioners in the reality, show them other projects, bike around as I showed, speak about real situations, eat an apple together, bake a fruit cake, all kinds of possibilities, and not just visualize. You can have communication with all kinds of things, with pictures made out of leaves, or with composing something together. And so all these different ways we can use as designers, and you can use to help people think about imagining other possibilities and futures. And then one thing was testing before, the other is during the experiment, monitoring what is happening. So we invited scholars, we invited students to look at us and to test our environment. So they have other eyes, they have other methods. For instance, the social cohesion was tested by some French girl who was observing us, so as if we were some strange foreign tribe or animals. So that she was 3-4 months living with us and looking what we did. So she noticed when we said hello, or when we crossed, or somebody was in a pool or at the street corner. And finally she had a kind of idea about where the neighborhood functioned and where it did function less, and where this social cohesion could work and where not. So that's a way of testing yourself. We had students monitoring our biodiversity, and then you have a picture of the neighborhood, but also information of the rest of the city, and you can learn which things work and do not work, although it's a very difficult methodological thing about knowing what's the relation between the design, the maintenance, and the result. No? So, but maybe others want to.
Yes, again, I'm not sure that I have understood the question. I mean, forms, architecture and form, yes. Mapping is about form. We are mapping forms. We read forms. We are, I think, trained to do that. So I don't understand exactly what is the point. But what I understand is that I refuse. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm going back to the question of utopia because it's 1 year in which we think about utopia, 1 year and a half, and I think it's good that this anniversary is coming back, because utopia has been completely, discarded, completely marginalized as a way of thinking, as one of the way of thinking, not the one that is producing dystopia, because utopia is a way of thinking. It's not producing immediately something, but is feeding the reflection. And 30 years ago, it was in 1973, Manfredo Tafuri wrote a project on utopia, in which he clearly closed the discussion about architecture having to do with utopia. And by saying, in fact, that we have to accept this sublime usefulness of architecture. And finally say, I prefer this idea of sublime usefulness, but still it is pathetic. No? So I think we have to go beyond that. We have to go beyond Tafuri. It's finished. We need utopia, and we need architecture and urbanism, and landscape architecture, landscape urbanism, to deal with utopia as a research tool, not as a truth, not as something that has to be immediately transformed in a dystopia. No, as a way to think, just as a way to think. And if forms can play a role, I think we have to work with forms. And especially the maps, they are exercise of reading. They are reading forms. They are ideography. They are trying to read the differences. To read differences is very important, because we are in a process of differentiation. No? Evolution is concerning becoming different. So we need to read it.
Would you like to respond to the technology and media?
To the technology, I'm not really a specialist of that. I can only say that one of the reasons why I use this idea of horizontal metropolis is also because when you go up to the alpine valleys, you speak with people that are metropolitan. Right. And this is related to, of course, communication, the easy way in which people now can be in contact to each other. And when I think to a metropolis, I'm not thinking to the traditional metropolis. I think that's clear. So in that sense, I would like to know if the Appalachians are metropolitan.
Maybe something about this modern media and ICT and all the possibilities For me, it's very important. That's also why I showed these children and their direct contact with nature, that the last 10 years, I think we are losing more and more contact with reality. So every day I go to my work from the railway station to The Hague. And when was the invention of the iPhone? But 10 years ago I was in the station and the people were reading at worst the papers, but they were talking to each other, they looked around, they realized that they were at the station. Nowadays everybody comes at the station and starts looking at the iPhone. So I think finally we don't need any real landscape, and because we are bodies, I think that's a bad thing. As such they aren't bad, but we have to learn to have both things now. Modern media, contact all over the world, but it's a very reduced contact because people have a smell, they are really existing bodies, not just likes, not likes. And so we have to learn that, and with great emphasis to have this contact. And also it's very important to eat real things and not just technological produced nano fruit, etc. It's good that they exist and that we go on with that, because I'm one of the ones that is working in the Netherlands with innovative technologies in agriculture. But on the other hand, losing the other is very dangerous, because like I said, we are really organisms and bodies, and we should care for them.
Well, I think we're really running very late, and thank you so much for the panel, and let's take a real break and with some real coffee and food, and we'll come back. Thank you.